Hi, I'm Tori James of Toriska Patterns, and today I'm going to be showing you how to sew the Mercury messenger bag, my newest pattern. And here it is, the finished version in the small size. And today I'm going to be sewing the small size, but there's also a large size. It has a flap. It's not as tall as most messenger bags, and inside a center divider pocket that you can make padded or into a zipper. 2 compartments. I've got diapers on one side, my wallet on the other, and there's 2 inside pockets, an elastic one and just a normal slip pocket. And on the outside there's a pocket on the front and a pocket on the back. So today we're going to start with the flap. Okay, first you need piece K and L. K is U-shaped. So if you use the cut chart and not the pattern piece, you'll follow the dimensions in the pattern, cut out a rectangle, and then you will turn your rectangle into a U shape by making this 2.5 inches all the way around. Now, in our first step in the pattern, we're going to take our ruler and mark 1/2 inch, and all of these dimensions that I'm telling you are in the pattern in millimeters and centimeters as well, but I'm going to be talking in inches. So you'll make a line 1/2 inch from the edge, from this corner and this corner, on both sides. Now, if I have a very stable, thick vinyl here, but for most fabrics, you're going to have it interfaced, or you might have it interfaced if you have a thin fabric, and you'll want to sew along this line that you just drew. Then we're going to cut this corner up to but not over this line. You'll notice I marked 2 more things here. I marked the center right here and the center right here. Now I have my piece L, the flap panel. If you just have fabric that can go in any direction, just make sure that you, for the small size, that you have it, that it's taller than it is wide. For the large size, it's a wider panel than it is tall. But for the small one, make sure that it's narrower. And if you happen to have a directional print, you're going to have to take care here. The bottom of your print will be the front of the panel when you're finished, like this. So you need to make sure that the bottom of your directional print, you match up to the middle of your U shape. So I've marked the center of both of these, and I'm going to match them together, and it's easiest with your flat panel piece down. I'm going to pin this, and then I like to pin these other corners next. And then I'm going to use my clips all the way up each side, and I'm going to show you the finished result. Okay. I have now clipped all the way around the U, and you'll have to spread out your V quite wide on both sides. So now I'm going to start this one end And the seam allowance for this pattern is 1/2 inch. That might seem kind of big. I actually prefer 3/8, but when I'm using a cut chart and all my pieces are rectangles and squares, I find 1/2 inch is the easiest. Okay. And I'm going to put my button to have my needle stay down. If you don't have that button, then don't worry about it. But as I get close to my my mark with a pen, I'm going to sew right over it. And you have to push back the excess so it's out of the way. Okay, as I get close to this edge, I'm going to stop with my needle down. And I like to just do a couple of diagonal stitches when I get here, because it makes it a little easier to do that point. Just do about 2 diagonal stitches. See if I can sew this so you can see. Oh, just did 2 stitches, and now you have to make sure that you're moving this part of the U out of the way so that you're not sewing over it. And I start sewing over my mark right here. Once again, I sew over my pen mark. And then as I get right up next to that point, I leave my needle down, put my foot up, move part of the U shape out of the way, do a couple diagonal stitches across that tricky area. You don't have to do a couple diagonal stitches if you're really good at sewing to a point and turning and not, oh, lost my train of thought. Sewing over that corner without being crooked, then just sew up to a point. But there's just doing 2 diagonal stitches makes it a little easier for me. Okay. So now, even though we did a little diagonal stitching, it still is a pretty sharp point. What I'm going to do is trim this to 1/4 inch. Then then I have to top stitch it to keep it looking nice. Okay. Oops, sorry for shaking the camera. When I top stitch this, I'm going to top stitch it out. Because I have vinyl, I'm not going to iron it, but I'm going to press my seam out with my fingers. And I'm going to be top stitching on the U shape, not the panel. And for top stitching, I always increase my stitch length, usually just to 3 or 3.5, but this time I'm going to try 4 because of the vinyl. Oh, and my machine doesn't really like vinyl, so I use a Teflon foot, and that helps a little bit. to help my machine kind of pull it through with vinyl because it struggles. Okay, and then when I get to the corner, I'll want to make sure to make it a nice, even corner. And I have my needle down, and I turn, and then I keep going. I'm going to finish this and then continue the video. Now I'm done with my flap. I top stitched all the way around. Before I sew the rest of the flap to it, I need to take care of the swivel hook. So I have my piece J. For the small size, I call for a 1-inch wide swivel hook. Though really, if you have other sizes, you'll just have to modify it to fit your size. So when I say 1 inch, it's on the inside of this rectangle part. But I actually don't have quite enough of the 1-inch ones for this whole purse because you need 3 hooks. So for this center hook, I'm going to have to use my 1.5 inch. So I'm going to use a smaller seam allowance on my piece J. You can use the interior fabric, the exterior fabric, or the accent, but since my accent fabric is thick, I didn't want to do that. And my machine wants to eat it. And my machine wants to come unthreaded. Let me fix this. Threaded, everything's fine. I switched back to my normal foot. All right, I'm going to turn this right side out. Side out, and you can fold it in half like this. It's actually my personal preference. I don't like having one side of the strap thicker than the other. I usually put that seam right down the middle when I have something like this. And no, I didn't mention that in the pattern, but it's something that I just prefer myself. So I'm going to wrap this around. Oh, first I'm going to top stitch. All right. My machine keeps trying to eat my fabric today. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this around it and sew across this. This fabric is going to not be showing this part, so I just sew across this to keep it in place for when I'm pinning it. Okay. Now I'm going to take my piece M, the flap interior, and first, before I sandwich these together, I'm going to find the center of the bottom of the U, because this is the front of the flap, and I'm going to baste on my my little connectors. Now I don't want to put it right on the raw edge because that sticks down too far. I'm going to put it about, I'm going to have it stick out about 3/4 of an inch. And that'll give me enough seam allowance to have it just sticking out. And I need my clips. Okay, I'm going to baste this in place. Okay, Now I'm going to clip all around these 3 edges and leave this edge here open. Oops, that'll be the back of the purse, so we're gonna leave the back edge open. I have pinned around 3 edges of my flap, and now I'm going to sew them. I am going to switch to a different foot. You don't have to, but I find it easier to do this with a zipper foot because of going past this swivel hook. Just makes it a little easier. When I pivot at the corner, I leave my needle down and keep going. All right, and when I sew over the swivel hook, I'm going to sew forward, back, and forward again. And that is just to keep it nice and secure. I have to sew kind of slowly because it is a bit thick. And back forward. Okay, so now I'm going to trim my seam, but I'm not going to trim the swivel hook all the way off. I'm going to trim it partially off, but I'm going to leave enough, probably about 1/4 1/8 of an inch, or sorry, 1/4 or 1/2 an inch. Actually, I'm just probably going to trim it off right here, 1/2 an inch. So when we turn it and top stitch it, it gets top stitched over, and that makes it more secure. But the rest of it I'm going to trim to about 1/4 or 1/8 of an inch. It's not an exact science. I don't like to trim too close to my seams because I'm afraid that'll make them weaker. But I don't want a whole lot of excess seam. Oh, and I go diagonal across next to the corners to make sharper points. Okay. Now I'm going to turn this right side out, and I'm going to insert my foam. The foam is completely optional. It does lay a little nicer without it, but I'm going to be putting a handle on this, and I like to have it a little thicker for the handle. And actually, this time, oops, sorry, forgot to turn in front of the camera. This time, I decided to try something a little bit in between, a little less thick than foam, and this is just some interfacing I had in my stash. I believe it's Pellon 926. It's not as thick as Peltex, but it's a fairly thick sew-in interfacing. So we're going to try that instead of foam. But first I have to find my point turner so I can get some nice points. Flap all the way out. I used my point turner to get some better points. And since I couldn't iron it because of the vinyl, I just finger pressed all the way around to try to get this a little crisper. Now I'm going to stick my interface inside, and I did cut half an inch off of each edge of this interfacing so it'll fit inside. And now I'm going to work it inside. Interfacing inside, and I pinned around the 3 edges where the U are at, and now I'm going to top stitch again, about a 1/4 inch from the edge. Usually I top stitch about 1/8 of an inch, and it says that in the pattern, top stitch unless otherwise noted at 1/8 of an inch. For this, I like to top stitch at a 1/4 inch so that I can make sure that I catch the edges. And I put on my Teflon foot because of this vinyl. Oh, my machine does not love this. It also probably needs to be serviced. But that's not happening today. I'll try to pivot at the edge. I'm going to hand feed it right here because my machine is struggling with the vinyl. I actually don't sew over vinyl very much, but I wanted to make sure I showed you how to do some of the vinyl adjustments that I wrote into the pattern. One thing I'm also going to do is I want to baste this edge closed. It'll just make it easier to work with later on. And we are done with the panel. So there you go. Next we're going to do the handle.